everyone, and welcome to our final session of today's Marketing Showcase webinar days. And my name is Ashley Jones. I'm the Event Director of Marketing Showcase. And as I said in the last webinar, I'm going to be your makeshift presenter and host today. So bear with me as I muddle through and introduce our next speaker, who is the wonderful Ben Catley-Richardson, Director of Brand Clear. And today he's going to be talking about 3 things that will make your business easier to notice, easier to remember, and easier to choose.
Right, fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Ash. I'm just going to share my screen now so we can get straight into the presentation. So yeah, I mean, basically for us, as well as helping businesses control what they communicate, that's our kind of elevator pitch. That's what we do for them. But it's because what we believe is that a clear brand makes all the difference, and it makes all the difference to your bottom line. And that really is why we're all here today, because marketing, business, all those kind of things, we're trying to make something work so that we can actually improve our profitability. Now, the first question really is what do you hate? Now, what I hate is actually, having done this talk last week in a live setting, I'm really not enjoying doing it in a Zoom setting. It's not nearly as exciting. I can't see your faces. We can't play off. I can't ask questions in the same way. But the thing is, for everything that you hate, there are elements that actually go, really positively. So the fact that there's nearly 80 people on this call, I can't really ignore that. That's really fantastic. And I can't hate that. And that's what Zoom gives us, even if it doesn't enable us to have an audience kind of participation process, which I really love in presentations. Now, one of the things that I think you probably do hate is people who aren't clear, people who waste your time, people who can't really describe to you why you should be spending time on them. And that's why a clear brand makes all the difference. It's also why, if you can be clear, if you can be straightforward and understandable, you can be easier to notice, easier to remember, and easier to choose. And just as a final thing, thinking about other things that we hate, because we all hate advertising, really, don't we? We all think it doesn't really work. It doesn't have much of an impact on our lives. But if I was to quickly throw out, and this would be the audience participation bit, but if I was to quickly throw out some sentences and say to you, compare the, I'm sure people are saying market, meerkat. If you're old enough to remember, what is a cigar that gives happiness? Happiness is a cigar called, I'm sure there's a few people out there saying Hamlet. And then we have, if I asked you a question of in the adverts, which is Peter Kay's favorite beer? It's John Smith's. You probably remember those from the beer. And of course, there's the old classic, you've been tangoed. Now, the thing is that even though we hate advertising, some of those will have rung true with you. Some of those will have triggered memories that you had. And that's basically what advertising is trying to do. In the long form, advertising is trying to make you remember a name, not necessarily make you buy it or make you think that it's the best thing for now, but it's because it makes it easier to notice, easier to remember. And if you can be those two things, you can be easier to choose. So if you're thirsty, tango comes to mind. It just does, because that's the way our memory works. So today we're going to talk about how you can be easier to notice, easier to remember, and easier to choose by focusing on 3 really important mindsets. Now, these are mindsets that we as businesses need to have in order to be those 3 things. So there is an SME trap that we're all a bit caught in. And one of those things is the fact that as a small, medium enterprise, we're never going to control our market. We're never going to be the big player. We're never going to really dominate it, because that's tied up by those 3 or 4 huge businesses in our area who are basically able to do almost what they like. Every pound that they invest gets them £2 of output, say, whereas every £2 that we invest gets us £1 of output. It's this comparison between already being big that gets you places and being small and having to fight that makes it much more difficult. And one of the things that translates to is the fact that we have to compete in a very different way to the big conglomerates. I heard somebody say brilliantly that marketing business really is like a knife fight in an elevator. And the whole point is that that's because you've got to fight for your corner. You've got to fight for your market share. There is market share out there, but it's not just going to fall into your lap. You've got to do something to get it. And this trap is the reasons, the approach that we take and the way in which we try and compete. And really, we've got a choice. We have to choose whether to differentiate ourselves, so to make ourselves look different from everybody else, or to disrupt against everybody else. And realistically, as small businesses, this is where we are, down this end. We don't have the R&D budget, we don't have the time or the backing or the financial kind of clout to really offer something completely different. And if you've ever tried to create a new category or to define a new category, you'll know how difficult that is, because you're starting from scratch. You need so much time, energy, and money, basically, to make that work. So we're down this end. The SMEs are down this end. We're trying to make ourselves different. It's no less exciting, and there are still innovations that you can make in those areas. But if we accept that we live down at this end, then we can go forwards. The trouble is, this is what we often look like when we're all trying to be different. How are we going to be different? Everybody's doing the same thing. So even though we're all trying to be different, even though we're all trying to make people sit up and take notice of us, we're different in all the same ways. We're like a sort of 16 people walking abreast down the street, each one of us with "I am an individual" written on our t-shirts. And often that's because we're trying to differentiate ourselves on aspects that aren't really suitable for that process. So this is the kind of thing we should be thinking about if we're going to be differentiating ourselves. I'm just going to move my window. I don't know whether you can see in the bottom right-hand corner the reasons why we can actually make a difference to our promotional activities or to our kind of external image, why we exist as a business, not just what we do or, you know, why we exist in order to make money, but why we exist as a business, where the idea came from. That's a difference we can play with. What we do and how we do it, it's really more about not just what we deliver, so the products that we create or the services that we deliver, but the process that we take in doing those things or in making those things. Is that different from everybody else? And then we can kind of find a way to stand ourselves out. Perhaps it's who we serve. Perhaps it's that we only look for people who have a specific need or who are in a specific circumstance. And that way we can then obviously make ourselves different. Maybe it's about our values. There's a lot of talk, obviously, often about values and having values. The thing you've got to remember is a value, like a principle, is never really a value or a principle until you have to sacrifice something for that thing. So until you have to give up on something in order to follow your values, it's not really a value. But what that gives you, if you can do that, is something that really does set you apart from the rest. So that's another way of being different. Obviously, our personality, the way that we talk, the way that we act and put forward our ideas, that's a way of being different. Ambition, what we're trying to achieve. These are the ways in which we can actually make ourselves look different. And by making ourselves look different in these ways, which are more to do with us and why we do what we do, we can stand out and we can start to be easier to notice and so on in those situations. Because what often happens is that we compete on hygiene. So rather than competing on the things we've just been talking about, we compete on caring, being trustworthy, being efficient, being quality, having integrity. The truth of it is that if you don't do these things, you shouldn't be in business. Nobody is going to make a choice and say, oh, well, I actually wanted the one where they didn't care. Oh, I'm glad that you have the first-class product because I was actually thinking about spending money on a second-class product. These are hygiene differences, which means they're not really differences at all. You might have won an award, you might have come first place in a league table somewhere, you might have the largest, operation in a certain area. But all of those things essentially are not differences. They're just, increments. They're just slight kind of variations, rational variations between you and somebody else. And ultimately, most of these things, the reason why they're not sustainable as differences is because you will be vulnerable to being undercut. If you come in and say we're the cheapest, there will always be somebody who will undercut you on price. If you come in and say you deliver the fastest, there will always be somebody who will come in and undercut you on delivery. They'll do it by cutting corners or saving money areas that you're not prepared to. But ultimately, those are not sustainable differences. You can't fight and win that fight with that difference because it's vulnerable and it leaves you in a situation that you can't defend. Whereas all the other things that are to do with you, to do with why you do what you do. And often, if you make decisions to do things that other people don't want to do, those are the things that can be sustainable, competitive advantages that you can defend. Because in order to follow you, people will have to sacrifice things in order to do what you've said you're going to do, in order to be different like you. So by doing that, by finding that difference in yourself, a way of standing yourself out from the crowd that can't just be copied or undercut, you are going to become easier to notice. And in the end, easier to remember and easier to choose. The second way that you can achieve these goals is by looking at your category in a different way. So a different mindset for your market. Now, you can't own the market. That's the big guys. But maybe you can own a corner. Maybe you can own a type of that market, a category, a certain definition of that market. If we look on here, this is a layout, a matrix of parking maintenance companies. So basically the people who issue fines if you park in the wrong place, or take the money and process it through for councils, say, who own parking areas. Now, you can split the market any way you choose. In this way, we've chosen to split it by the technology versus the service, the size and scale versus the engagement and the ethics. And so you begin to see how the market lays out. You've got the techie one at the top. You've got Europe's #1 one. And these are all ways that these businesses, these big businesses, can put themselves out and say, we're the biggest, we're the most reliable, we're the ones that have the biggest technological budget for giving you the fastest resolution to your process. We're the ones, 3GS, that have the ethical approach that you don't know. We're the ones, what they call Excel parking, that the excellent driven ones. You know, these are all aspects that they're competing on. But what you can begin to see is that actually there are gaps in this market. So this side of the market, the right side of the market, is very full. The left side of the market, not so. So looking at that, you can start to begin and say, where do we fit in this market? Is our approach, if we were a parking maintenance company, are we more technology driven? Are we more service driven? Can we be technology and engagement and ethics and push over here and get up to a gap where there's nobody currently? Or do we redraw the market entirely to one of our strengths? What's our strength? And that's ultimately where it comes down to. If you've got a market picture that you can draw that emphasizes your strength, your difference in that market, and everybody else is sitting in a different area, and you can own a section of that market, that means that you can deliver something that's easier to notice because fewer people are offering it. So if you are offering, in this example, some sort of technology-driven way of increasing engagement and ethics in your business, you'd have a way, an angle of coming into the business and talking about what you do in a way that is not only different to everybody else, but that corners the market for the people who actually want that kind of delivery. And so you begin to see that by looking at your market and figuring out the gaps, you can start to find a corner that can be yours and that you can defend. Ultimately, though, these two aspects, these two mindsets don't really matter much if nobody cares. So one of the most important things is, what does your audience care about? What do your buyers care about? What do the people that you serve, what really matters to them? Now, essentially, you have two reasons that people make decisions. And if you look in your heart of hearts and think about the things that you've bought recently, you'll probably recognize that most of the things we spend money on are disappointing. They let us down. And this is actually where brand comes into it. Brand is just really a shortcut to satisfaction. I have bought the same pair of shoes 2 or 3 times in a row because I know that even if they start to fall apart, they will remain waterproof. I have bought the same car or make of car several times in a row because although I know that it will have problems, I know what those problems are going to be. It's reliability, it's expectation, it's minimizing the risk of regret. I could step out and purchase a different brand of shoes or a different brand of jacket or a different brand of car, but I'd be taking a risk. And I'd need somebody to make sure that risk was as minimal as possible, or as controlled as possible before I made that process. There was a study done not so long ago that showed that when people consider banks, places to put their money, to the nearest whole number, people only consider one option. They don't even consider two options when they're thinking about a bank. They have it in their head what bank they're going to use, and then they rationalize why they're choosing that bank. But mostly it's because they have an emotional connection to that bank already. That bank has built up some sort of risk management in their head, and they're the ones they think of, and they never even think of another one. And that is basically what consumers are mostly trying to do, minimize the risk of regret. Now, with business to business, it's almost worse, because actually blame is worse than regret. You get blamed, you could lose your job. So when people are making decisions in a business, they're trying to minimize the risk of blame. And so this is why decisions can take a long time in business to business. It's also why decisions can be very fraught. And again, why in B2B, it's almost more important to make that emotional connection, to really bridge that gap of trust and make sure that people really believe in you, and why it's so difficult to get people to move beyond where they're familiar. You've all heard the expression, nobody got fired for buying IBM. And that is basically because these are defensive decisions. They're decisions that prevent us from getting hurt, because ultimately we're just basically waiting for our new purchase to disappoint us. So by looking at these three mindsets, the difference that you use to stand yourself out in the marketplace, the place that you corner in your category or market, and what really matters to your audience and how you can help them to bridge the gap of risk. These are the three mindsets that you need to control and to basically communicate in a positive way with your audience in order to become easier to notice, easier to remember, and easier to choose. And to give you an example of how that looks in practice, we're just going to take you through a client of ours called Woe. Woe are a skincare brand, and they have a really exciting way of approaching skincare, which is that it's skincare designed specifically for your skin type. Now, that's a great way of approaching things, but their messaging at the beginning, uniqueness, celebrating the individual, skincare for all, it doesn't really connect with people. It doesn't really have a difference. It doesn't really stand out of this huge multi-million, billion-pound industry that is skincare. So what we did was dig down to the bottom of what really made them different. And what we discovered was this process that they ran in order to help people understand their own skin. And basically, it turns out there are 5 types of skin type, only 5. And by understanding which skin type you fit into, you can gain more control over your skin and therefore have better, more reliable results of your skincare routine and your skincare products. Great, fantastic. So how do we get that out? Well, first of all, we started talking about the fact that where does that skin type come from? It comes from your ethnicity, comes from your heritage, comes from your background, the story of you. So we have something to play with. Then we look at the market and we see that actually, although there are a huge number of people who are appealing to the broad kind of market, the mass market, there are also a lot of people who are on that angle and taking a personalized skincare approach. There are very few brands in this space that are looking at being personalized and specialized. So not just personalized in terms of what you want out of it, but specialized in terms of how it helps you get what you want out of it and how it's researched and developed in order to get the best possible results. So there we go. We've divided the market in a way that gives Woe the strength, that puts Woe into a fantastic position over there in the right-hand corner, the one that gives you control. And sorry, I'm just moving my window about because I don't know whether it's in your way, but basically we're then looking at how we celebrate your diversity, celebrate your ethnic diversity, but also how you can control what's right for your skin. So you can guide people to making the right choice, which obviously is the most important sales lesson of all. And we do this by, first of all, understanding that you've got to deliver to people a specific need that they have, you've got to solve, and it's got to be for a specific person. And it's got to be in a specific way or with a specific delivery. And that's through going through psychographic, biographic, and geographic processes. Because if we only do geographic, where are they? Or we only do biographic, say, how much money do they have to spend, or what areas do they move in? you miss that need, that psychographic level that tells you why these people feel this way or the feelings that they actually have. And that is key and critical to actually being noticed and remembered. And at the bottom, you get to this specific need, this specific who, this specific where you're going to get them and how you're going to deliver the product. And essentially what we started to do with why was look at people who wanted control, women who choose not to chase the mass market or the perfection or the way in which the mass market advertises skincare and beauty products, but that what they want is the control over their own skin. They can want control over their own lives and how that skincare actually works for them, and reliability over the results they get. And so we moved them to this process. We moved them to basically skin control rather than just unique, skincare, skin control that begins with your origins. So we have an actual statement to make. And there you go, there's their elevator pitch in even less than 10 words. And then what it also means, once you've got this specificity, you can start to tell really interesting stories. So you can start to tell the experience of these people who have these 5 different skin types. You can start to say things that they would recognize. So someone sees an advert, it has their story on it. It's therefore closer to their heart, easier to notice because it means something to them, it resonates, easier to remember because it sticks with them. It actually has an emotional connection with them. And then ultimately it's easier to choose because they are the only brand that they think of when they next have that problem, when they next have that need. There we go. So that basically is the whistle stop of how to make yourself easier to notice, remember, and choose. And it ultimately comes down to these 3 mindsets, just understanding what really makes you different and how you can stand out, understanding that area of the market that you can survive in and that you can actually own, and then really understanding and connecting and serving what matters to your audience and what they need. So I've lost my cursor. I will just leave it there. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, thanks for watching another recording from Marketing Showcase Online. I hope you enjoyed it. Just to let you know, we've got all of the recordings uploaded to our brand new YouTube channel, so go over there and check it out if you want some more great content. We run these events once every month, free of charge, so head over to our website to grab tickets for next month's event. I look forward to seeing you there.